So
Truth. I think it's this top one, right? No.
It's the next one.
No, this one. This one.
Three's a charm. There you go. You're recording.
Okay.
And we'll.
So I have a question about this because my presentation is like 15, 20 minutes. And then we're doing an interactive session out there. And then I'm going to have them like come back to regroup.
Mhm.
Are we going to like slice that?
Yeah, we can edit it.
Perfect. Cool.
So what'll happen once the camp's over, I'll see what actually managed to make it through. I'll download them. I'll put them in Google Drive, and usually Phil does the actual editing of them.
Okay.
Although I might, depending on what his time situation is like.
Okay. There's just going to be a huge chunk of dead space in there if we don't.
Yeah, that's totally fine. You could even turn your camera around if you wanted, because it's going to give us both the feeds, one from the screen and one from your camera. So you can turn it around and have the room, but that's
Probably
a little
won't.
weird.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
Okay. I really appreciate you walking me through that because I'm sure I would not have been able to do it on my own.
Each of the tables has a pen and paper on it.
This is the interactive
room. Life choice by sitting at a certain table.
Well, you should sit at a table that other people are at. It's more fun when you have more people, right?
Sounds good. I'm pretty sure we all consolidate into one.
That's right.
Hi, Barry.
My presentation plan.
Hi.
Can I get a picture
Oh, yeah.
of us?
Sure.
Presentation
This
plan.
is such an honor. This is that. But I like it.
Wish you good luck.
Thank you. So what's your
No. You're good.
I think next door is the login process.
Yeah, there's something going on. Another one's like a sponsor. Or are you using Google Slides?
I'm actually using Figma.
You're like Lynn, you're just like, I'm doing it in Figma.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
I don't know. No, I just wanted to try it out.
Oh, yeah, it seems fun.
Yeah, it's their new beta.
Okay. Cool. Yeah.
It's actually really easy to read the slides. It has really nice templates.
Okay.
And then I said, hey, designer friend, can you
Yeah.
come make them a little bit nicer?
Figma.
Can't really see it so well, but there's a really pretty gradient on this
Oh,
slide.
I'm picking it up. When I'm part of that 3% that's colorblind.
Oh, okay.
That's not, this is apparently not the part. This is bluer in the top left and redder in the bottom right.
Yeah, yellowish.
That's what I said. All right.
All right, good luck.
Thank you.
You don't need it.
We don't.
I encourage everybody to join tables with multiple people. Otherwise, you're on your own for brainstorming, which does not sound very fun. I like it. People should come join Leslie over here in the front.
But can't I just claim ignorance if I can't see them?
No worries, that's okay.
Is this brainstorming going to be painful? Because any kind of lightning going on in my head.
I hope it's not too painful for you. You can cheat and look at the questions on the paper.
It's Friday afternoon.
That's true.
Let's brainstorm.
Yeah. I'm into a few weeks after. That's right, we're here.
I do know that some people like to come prepared to meetings, and use already fine, so. I do understand, we are gonna do some alone brainstorming time too. So you don't have to start off by being fully in there. What if I like a bagel? Or like somebody who's really happy, they're eating some food, and then all of a sudden.
See, I was thinking it's like a guilt test. Whoever eats the bagels, the guilty one.
It just looks so nice and untouched, I was like, you can't toss that yet, it's too late. I need to come back, so.
Maybe they made it, came here, sat down, and then just, let it call.
I don't know what happened.
The water bottle and everything, dude.
I know. I give people like 2 more minutes, just in case.
Step 1, dominate world. Step 2, done.
You're saying get it done Tuesday.
All right, let's get started. I don't hit stuff. Thank you all for coming today. It's really awesome to see all of your amazing faces out there. Very excited to get to know each of you. I feel like I've talked to a lot of the people that are in this room right now, so it's really cool to see you all here. I am Chris Coughlan, or Christine, as my full name implies here, and I am the Director of Content Strategy for Anthrotech. And Anthrotech is an agency based out of Olympia, Washington. We do human-centered design, and we partner with a lot of other agencies to do the development side of web projects, usually related to government agencies or nonprofits or other enterprises that have a social impact mission. And I've been working in UX and content for over 10 years. Got my start with At Design Group as a strategist there and as an information architect, and I have loved all of that work since. So that's why I'm here. And we're going to be talking about kicking off projects successfully. So there are 3 main parts to today's session that we will be going through. The first is what I call set the stage. So this is where we are going to identify the problems within that kind of first section of a project, that is project initiation. We're going to align on what I mean by a digital project, as well as what it means exactly to kick off that project. Second, we're going to talk about what we can do. I'll be sharing a few principles as well as some activities that I have used during that phase of a project that I'm hoping you all can relate to and will get ideas from. And then third, which is my favorite part, the fun part, which is brainstorming together. So like I mentioned earlier, if you are at a table by yourself, I highly encourage you, when we get to this portion, to consider moving to another table so that you can have some conversation with some other people. You don't have to move yet, but I just want to give you that heads up. So let's start off by setting the stage. Again, what I'm trying to do here is help you to understand the problem space that we are in. So again, what does it mean to kick off a project? What does it mean to say that we're working on a digital project specifically? So we'll start with the digital project. These are projects that really result in some kind of experience on the web. So this could be something that a person interfaces with on their personal computer or a laptop, or maybe something that they're interfacing with on their phone or a tablet, or even on something wearable like a smartwatch. So quick poll as we get started. Raise your hand if you have contributed to a digital project from start to finish. Most of the people in this room. Awesome. So you'll probably know a lot of what I'm talking about already, but just in case, I want to make sure that we set the stage as to really what I mean by the phases of a project. So you can see here, every project would probably differ a little bit, but I've kind of identified these 5 key phases in a project, especially something that is where you're building something new for someone. You could easily add a 6th stage over there that's all around maintenance as well, but I wanted to focus on this specifically. So today, we're talking about the initiation phase. And that's really those steps and activities that we conduct at the beginning of that project to set us up for success for the duration of the rest of the project. Our second phase there is discovery. This is all around gathering information, understanding that problem at a really good depth of what you're trying to create. Then we have our design phase, which is creating those detailed plans and really designing out all those different specifications within that whole span of the project. Fourth, you can see we have implementation. That's the part where the developer comes in and starts building it out, making it real. And finally, our launch. So that's when we get to release this to those end users to actually use on a day-to-day basis. Now you might see this and you'll be like, yeah, Chris, that's very waterfall-y if you're familiar with that term. We work in Agile. Again, everyone's different, but for the purposes of this particular session today, we are using kind of this format, and specifically, we want to focus on this phase right here, project initiation. I want to make it even more clear what I mean when I say project initiation or kicking off a project.
I'm not talking about an individual activity such as a kickoff meeting that an agency and a organization might have together, but really all of those steps and activities that you're taking at the beginning of that project to set you up for success. So that could be things like internal kickoffs, a handoff from the salespeople to you, or maybe you're talking about a project that is internal to a team. For example, maybe you work for a university where you're like, all right, I have this project that we're kicking off. I know that we have our stakeholders. I know that we have our team members that are actually building this thing out. So it applies to both. It can be that kind of partnership with a vendor agency or an internal project. This phase is all about really setting the rest of this project up for success. This is a time for us to start to understand how we're going to communicate as a team and really get aligned on what it is that we're trying to build and trying to accomplish. If you're like me, you're probably thinking, okay, but really who is we in this scenario? Let's talk about that. Who's involved in a digital project? I like to think about this in 3 different categories. And the first category that I'm going to bring up is project leadership. Don't knock my computer off. These people are the ones that are responsible for the health of the project. They are most likely the people that are leading that initiation phase that we were just talking about. They are thinking through those steps. They're leading the different activities through that time period. They are the people that we are going to be really speaking the most about today, because again, so much of that is on their shoulders. Some of the common roles that you might see in the team leadership category here include a UX lead or a design lead, a developer or tech lead, as well as your project managers, account managers, and engagement managers. Especially if you are on that agency side, you usually have that engagement manager that's there, making sure that that relationship between the people is really strong. Our second category of people involved are what I like to call the makers. These are the people that are responsible for doing that day-to-day work of designing and implementing the solution. So if you think back to those 5 project stages, they're often highly involved in the discovery, design, and implementation phases. They are literally researchers, strategists, designers, developers, QA specialists, accessibility specialists, maybe even some writers within that category, and they all are working together to create that cohesive experience for that product. They're looking to that team leadership group for direction, and they're looking to our third group, our stakeholders, for the vision of that product. So let's talk about stakeholders. These are our decision makers. They are the visionaries of the product that you're building. They are the influencers, if you will, for that product. They have specific goals in mind that they are trying to solve, and they're using this product to help solve those goals. They're often the people in an organization that take on some leadership responsibilities. They're the ones that are there saying, like, this is how we move forward. This is where we need to get to. They also are the people that provide all of the subject matter expertise to you. And in many cases, we also have a lot of communication specialists coming in that, again, are talking about how they communicate with their different users. So these are the 3 kind of categories that we're thinking about. And again, much of today's session is going to be focused on what can these people here in this leadership role do to ensure that we make a really solid product and have a solid kickoff process or project initiation phase. So, another poll time. Raise your hand if you usually represent the leadership group on your digital projects. A couple people? A few people? Okay. How about the makers? A lot of people. Okay, a lot of you. How about stakeholders? None of you. Okay, perfect. Does anybody feel like their role was not represented in any of these groups? Perfect. Okay. What I'm going to try to do is tailor some of this then, since so many of you are the makers, to think about too, how you specifically then can communicate with your team leadership, your project leadership, to make sure that you're getting what you need out of this project initiation phase as well. All right. Before we move any farther, to finally get to our actual problem that we're trying to solve is, during this project initiation phase, we are trying to make sure that people have all the information that they need. And the people within those teams often have different needs. So thinking about those different categories, leadership, makers, and our stakeholders, there might be some that's crossover, but there might be some things where one group might really strongly need something and the other group maybe doesn't need that as much. I've identified kind of what I would say are 4 core needs of these different people during this phase of the project. And the first one is, what is it that we're actually creating? Is it a website? Is it an application for your phone or for your watch? Is it an interactive web experience? We don't know yet. Second is, what's my actual role on the project? What is it that I'm going to be contributing? Am I serving as a designer? Am I serving in that phase primarily of the project? If I'm a stakeholder, what kind of subject matter expertise might I need to bring to the table? Third, over there, how will we work together? If you're a maker, what aspect, I looked at my notes wrong, sorry. How we will work together is, what tools might we actually use on a given day? And how will we provide feedback to each other? Or how will we request feedback from somebody else? When will we actually come together and meet to discuss all these different ideas or share out what we've created? And then our final category is, what is our timeline? How long do we have to create this project or product? And how does that timeline actually affect what we can get done on that project? So think about it from like a features perspective. If you say you want the world on this product, can you actually get that done in this timeline? Or do we need to consider reducing that list down to something different? So these are the kind of 4 key needs or core goals for this project initiation phase that we're trying to solve for. How do we do that? Let's talk about what we can do. Like I mentioned in the beginning, I want to share 3 principles with you that I want you to keep in mind as we are thinking through the different steps and activities for that project initiation phase. And then I'm going to show you 4 examples of some different activities that I've specifically used on my projects that have been really successful to getting people involved in that stage and helping answer some of those questions. Again, these 4 questions. So first, those principles. The first principle that I like, and I know it's kind of cliche, is teamwork makes the dream work. The whole point of this is that we are a team. We're coming together to create something cohesive, something that's going to solve a problem. So we collaborate with our coworkers and with our stakeholders to create the best possible project. I like to think about this as, when we get a group of people with diverse backgrounds in a room designing something for someone else to use, that is when we can be our best selves. We can bring in all those different ideas and create something that's really inclusive for everyone. We know that our biggest mistake here is to build the wrong thing. So by being a team, bringing in that diverse background, we can start to make sure we're building the right thing for those individuals. The second principle that I want to share is that communication is key. Successful teams communicate really, really effectively. In everything that we do, we make sure that communication is our first priority. We already know that knowledge gets lost when you have to translate from one person to another person. And so we really work hard to reduce changes within our project team, keeping that team consistent so that everybody gets the same information. When we do have to make team changes, we make sure that we have that onboarding process in place for that new person. And most importantly, we write things down. We need to make sure that we are writing down all the decisions. I can't tell you the number of projects that I've been on where I have a client that says, we didn't make this decision. And I'm like, but here's the notes where you did. So great. How do we move past this? Which really brings me into the third principle, which is be flexible. Change happens. Like I just said, decisions might be made, but when you see that in real life, sometimes you change your mind again. It honestly happens all the time. There's no way to get around it. Let's be honest. Change is the only constant on projects. So with everything that we do, we want to make sure that we are remaining flexible in this process. And that really goes from that project initiation phase through the whole project. We also understand that people work differently. So we want to make sure that we're hearing each other out and adapting when needed. All right, so I want to show you 4 different activities that I've used on some of my projects that I found to be really helpful during this project initiation phase, keeping in mind that no size fits all. So these are just ideas that you can take back to your own work. But these activities really keep those 4 key needs in mind. So what are we creating? What's my role? How will we work together? And what is our timeline? As well as those 3 principles of teamwork makes the dream work, communication is vital, and be flexible, change happens. Keeps all of those principles and ideas in mind as we go through these activities. Let's take a look. This is the first activity that I love to create. This was something that was introduced to me at my current employer, and I immediately fell in love with this. They call this the Team Hub, and this is one that I set up for a project that I was on where we were working to update the UX copy within a product that was moving from a very old version to a new version. And you can see here that I have put everything together to make sure that people know all the different parts, who's involved. So what are our roles? Who's doing what? Who are our clients even? These resources over here. What's important to keep in mind? What are some things that relate to this work specifically? You can see over there in the far corner, we have kind of like a little bit of a roadmap or a calendar of what's expected during this project. Up there in the top, that's our SOW. So it's actually a link out to a PDF, but I just wanted to give you a little peek of some of the information in there. But it keeps everything together so that this is a good reference for you to come back to as a maker, especially if you're like, what is it again that we're doing? Who do I need to reach out? Who's my designer? I don't remember. Who's my key stakeholder? Remember, we got some of our clients listed here. So I absolutely love this because it's a really great way to bring everybody, give them the information they need up front and have it in a central location for people to come to. Now, I personally love the visual aspect that Miro or a FigJam type of system provides to you because it's very nice to be able to like organize things in a really great way. You could do this simply in a Google Doc if you wanted to. It would just be a list in that case. But the key important part is to make sure that you're bringing all those resources together. The other thing that I use our team hubs for, which I'm not showing you on this screen, is to actually document what it is that our key priorities are for every week of our project. So simply saying, this week we're working on the style guide. This week we're working on creating actual content for this one workflow. This week it's the second workflow, etc. The second activity that I want to share with you all is this fun activity about getting to know each other. So I love this template that my coworker and I put together at a past employer that I was at. And up here at the top, this was done in FigJam. So up at the top, you can see we have just some little cards. It's a little bit more fun, where you can put in a picture of yourself, your name, your position or role on the project, your pronouns, and a little bio information. So this is a really nice way to start to get to know each other so that you're not like just sitting in a room where you're like, okay, Tina, I know you're on this project, but really, who are you? This starts to help us figure that out. The second activity here is a whole activity around preferences. So this is a little slider, and each of these have examples. They have words. I know you can't read it because I can barely read it up here, but each of these have words on them that are kind of the opposite. So you can use this preferences board to start to understand how it is that people like to work. So, for example, one of these is, I like to brainstorm alone and bring my ideas to the meeting afterwards. On the flip side is, let's just dig right in and brainstorm together. Where do you sit on that scale? Another idea is, I like to have my heads down time in the morning or in the afternoon. You can also have fun with this, where we have one on here that's actually, I prefer cake or pie. That may not actually come into play within your projects, but some of those can still help you to start to get to know that person and bring that human element to your project. If you take that example about, I like heads down time in the morning versus the afternoon, as the project lead, you can be like, cool, I see that 90% of my team likes heads down time in the morning. That means I'm going to try to schedule our group meetings in the afternoon. So you can use some of that information to start to set up your project for success down the road as well. The third item here is the deliverables roadmap. You saw a really simple one that was more calendar-based because that was like a 2-month project and we were like speeding through things. This one here is more kind of this like swim lane type of thing. It's multiple months. We got November, December, January, February, March, April. So this goes over the course of many months. And what we've done here is we've broken our project down into different categories of work. So this was actually the content production phase of a project that we were working with our client on, where we had our main website redesign at the top. And then we were really focused on how are we going to get this content updated. So we have a content production plan, the creation of some guidelines for our content creators, our actual content production where we're actually writing stuff, our content strategy support where they're like, we don't know what to do with this page. What do we do, Chris? And it's like, great, we gotcha. And then we just have a general bucket of HCD, human-centered design consulting at the bottom. And you can see we have some timelines in there. We have sticky notes for like specific things that we're doing or trying to accomplish in each of those different phases. The important part to note about this roadmap is that by putting this together early on, when change happens, we can be intentional about what we do about that. We manage that change really effectively. Say we need to move out our content production a little bit because we're not quite ready. We can do that, but we do it intentionally because we already had a plan in place and we know why we are moving it out. The fourth and final activity that I wanted to show you is this team agreement. And I'm really bummed that Greg is over here presenting next to me right now, because Greg and I have had many, many, many conversations about team agreements in our lives together and how important they are, when they need to be updated, all of that. But I hate starting projects without a team agreement because this tells everybody exactly how we're going to work together. Some of the categories that I like to include within a team agreement are things like, what are our working hours? I have been primarily working on remote teams for the last, 5 more years. And I want to make sure that if I have team members that are in the Eastern time zone or the Pacific time zone, I'm taking that into consideration when I'm building out a schedule or building out like when we're going to meet on different things. I also want to understand if there's like specific things that they really prefer or must be doing from a schedule perspective. For example, A lot of my team members have had to start their day later because they need to drop their child off at school. Those are real situations, and I'm going to try my best to schedule things around those kinds of appointments. I also have a colleague that does has a recurring lunch meeting with somebody every Thursday. I try my best to accommodate that as well. So anything around kind of working hours, people's personal schedules is great to include in a team agreement. In addition to that, we have a category here about meeting etiquette. Make sure you're on time. What does being on time mean? How are we going to handle situations where somebody is running late from another meeting that they're in? How do we like work through those different things? So through these things, you can start to add in questions or literally just throw stickies up as ideas around that topic. Some of the other categories that I also really like to include are around like broader communications, as well as those different tools that we're going to use within our project. So that could be like, where are we going to post our artifacts that we create? How are we going to utilize Slack? When do we need to actually set up a meeting versus what can we do asynchronously? Those types of things. Before we get into the brainstorming section, are there any questions around any of those activities that I just shared? Yeah, Kevin.
You take into account balancing introverts and extroverts when trying to.
I think that that's a really great way to like start to think through some of the ideas on here too. One of these is actually like, how do you like to get feedback too, which I think kind of gets into that kind of category as well. But you could be really explicit and be like, where do you fall on a scale of introvert versus extrovert even?
I work on teams where some people use environment difficult to create that kind of
Cameras is a great thing also to put on your team agreement. Like, how are we going to? Are there cases where we must have our camera on, where you can come together as a team? Because the whole point of this is you are coming together as a team to agree on these things. It's not something that I'm saying, this is how we're going to work. It's collaborative. We're all agreeing to that together. Thanks for the question. Yeah, Tina.
About the time zones, I work on teams where we get people in California, people in New York, people in the Ukraine,
Yeah.
people in Sweden. It's like crossing all those time zones, it becomes just a nightmare. So there is no such thing as a work day.
Mm-hmm.
And me, I'm kind of in the middle of Denver, mountain time, so it's like I got to work early for some of them, I got to work late for others. I end up working all the time.
Yeah.
How do you manage something like that?
That's a great question. I think that's where that whole asynchronous versus synchronous communication is absolutely key to nail down, especially in a team agreement, where you can be like, okay, what is the absolute reason for meeting as a full group? And when can we do that? Who's willing to flex, and how much are you willing to flex? When can we find that time where we would have that meeting specifically? Then you can block that off on people's calendars and say, all right, we probably don't need this every week, but we at least have this put here on our calendars in case we do need it.
It's a compromise for everyone.
Yeah. Good question. Any others? All right, let's do our brainstorm then. Oops. So again, we're going to brainstorm together. This is my favorite part because I don't have all the answers, and I really value your all's input on this as well. So given our time, we're going to spend about 10 minutes doing this retrospective. So everybody can flip over that giant piece of paper on their table now. There's 3 questions on it. You'll also have some sticky notes on your table. And if you're at a group by yourself, which we don't have anyone, but if you want to partner up more, you can. So I'll let you all read the questions, and then just to give you a little precursor for what we're going to talk about when we regroup We have one question, which is literally, what's one thing you're taking away from today's session? So as you work in your groups, think about that question too. So not everybody has to answer, but I'd love to hear from at least 5 people.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, please. It's always nice to have a teacher around. So I actually work on
My first question, us being a group, is the picture role, what roles does everybody typically play? Because it asks what your typical role is. I'm gonna make sure it's
these are decision makers. I think,
I will always be a coordinator.
Yeah.
So. We can think about
I'm trying to branch out, so we get more people. That's gonna be one.
So thinking about your role as a patron on setting that foundation.
My first thought was, is there, has this been done before, or are we doing something new? If it's been done before, is there any previous documentation or previous people that have done the same thing that we can talk to or look at?
So I did. We are starting in the process, so we talked about this before.
so that you don't recreate your mind full of, well, this time. Yes, I know. I'm a fan of like wizard to build money, leadership, initiative, what happened.
Why is such a very great, we don't need this, like, for these purposes.
We come up with it and they go,
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess we're not doing that.
Yeah, the guy was
So,
first thing he said was,
Yeah.
it's like, why? I don't know.
It's one of the number one things that when I work with, so it's like, okay, someone did something kind of like this before, but we don't really know what happened to it.
I know.
And it's like, okay, so I now gotta track people down, work everything backwards myself.
Yeah, I mean, I can see a whole other category.
How is he
Yeah.
Not just what was.
How is he going to get?
Starting.
So that's kind of.
Also, it's a brand new product. It's a brand new product from scratch.
Well, it depends on the technology.
So what is success look like?
Yeah, like that takes like one
Like, what's our timeline and how much time do we have to do this and how to set things?
Yeah.
That's supposed to be your timeline. how true this thing is, or is it in a budget or is it? Depending on what it is. Which of those things? Alright, so think about these, what activities are you using your task?
This meeting with developers and just starts talking about it, asking questions.
Just hash it out.
Yeah. I ran into that when I was part of a brand new project at my own home. So me and all the people actually doing it was one group, but then the department head, the state executive, the one who's really like the one with the vision and the one fighting for us. It was really helpful to be able to talk to him because that's usually the entire process.
We're also supposed to be thinking about the question that's no longer in the thing, which is.
What's one thing you're taking away?
I think I've run into setting more realistic expectations. I think we kind of talked about that. Sometimes you gotta scale back a bit.
Nobody does that, the initiation phase, right?
That it's gonna.
Which is what we're using way.
Is what people really want.
So, I guess that's great. And it's just too for that.
This is like a thing that we actually need. One person really pushing hard just to be.
That's also going to help.
One part of I don't know what else he's done here, but this part isn't working.
But inclusivity is one of
All right, let's regroup. So I mentioned that we would have one question that I wanted you all to think about outside of what you did on your paper. which is what's one thing you're taking away from today's session? So you already got to talk in your groups. So now who would like to share this? What's something that you learned today that you want to take away, do in your own work? That could be something that you're like, I'm going to do this on my next project. Or as a maker, you might be like, I really want to share this piece with my project lead because I think they should do this. Yeah.
I like both the hub and the agreements plan, you know, being able to like get to know how people, because even if you work with the same person on a different project,
Yeah.
you know, they might have different feelings about that project.
Right.
So yeah, I like both of those ideas.
Perfect.
I think this right here of talking with the people on the team about previous experiences that they've had, like this last question. What could you have done better
What's
in
happening?
the initiation phase of previous projects?
Yeah. Did I see something? Yeah.
Find a way that it's not out with time zones.
Yeah. They're so hard. I hate it that we have all these different time zones that we need to represent, but there are ways that we can bring that back and really think through that strategically. Anyone else want to share? We got like 4 minutes. Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of the things that you ended up writing down also kind of came back to your point on things.
Mm-hmm.
But knowing that the challenge is finding the balance with the beginning of a project, there might be very little information or very little that's concrete. So that's just like tricky.
Yes.
Maybe conversation is the best way to surmount that. Get everyone talking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's so important. And really, honestly, the more that you can have all three of those groups in the room together at that point, even better, because those makers can really share their experience then of like, here's what I saw in the past. And the visionary, that stakeholder can be like, oh, I hadn't even thought about doing it in that kind of way. And that can be a really good way to like have some of those conversations and really think through what is it that we're actually building. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else want to share?
Question.
Yeah.
I'm on in a group that feels like we are inherently dysfunctional because we don't have project manager resources.
Mm-hmm.
And so when these projects come through, it's just like, hey, here's the loose objective, here's a timeline, figure it out, and the individual contributors just sort of have to piece things together.
That was my least favorite team type.
Like, there's not much, you know, there's a lot of things that would be nice, but it's hard when you don't even have somebody to support it.
Yeah. So who can you share that kind of information from? Like yeah, who in your organization can you be like, hey, I saw this like gap in the way we set up our teams.
No, you've
done that. That's so troubling. Anybody have any specific advice for her?
Yeah, usually when a role isn't filled, especially in a work like a really key role, someone just ends up having to bite the bullet and do it. You know, asking for volunteers or even, you know, spending more time that you're not getting paid for to fill that so the whole project doesn't sink. It's kind of a sacrifice that one person has to make.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of people that.
Yeah, that can even do it. It's like you're already working 80 hours a week.
Yeah.
And
you don't get rewarded. You're like,
no. And you're often punished for it as well.
In your next role, find out how long you can handle someone. There's constant turnover in the project management. That's a good sign. Maybe there's a problem.
It's true. Yeah.
Also, I guess identify your responsibilities so that even if things fall apart, you can make sure that you are protected. You've done everything that you're supposed to do. Because, like, when you're relying on other people and other people fall through, making sure that you are taken care of is probably the most important thing to do in that scenario.
Anyone else want to share or ask a question? They're still talking, so we can stay too. All right, cool.
Comment, I think that discovery phrase, you mentioned that a little bit, but often, like, it just seems like I've seen it, like, it's trending, like, the value of, like, UX research, and then it kind of comes and goes every once in a while, and this moment of the economy. I'm not too sure what's happening right now, but like the discovery phase is so critical. It's like step number 2, right? In this process of understanding what needs to happen. And I think there's a lot of time lost then if you skip that phase and you start jumping to design implementation, then you end up going back to the drawing board often, when you don't have the discovery fully fleshed out. So I'm just like more of a comment. I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I think that's a point of failure right there, a huge point of failure when you don't have that discovery. Really, no one really doesn't have any design directions.
Yeah, so stay tuned next year for Alex's talk on the discovery phase. Yeah, no, great point. Thank you. All right, well, that's all I had for you today. Please connect with me. I absolutely love getting to know people. There's my LinkedIn, or you can email me and come talk to me.
Your story about this, large project.
That's great, Chris.